saw, too, that when we judges don our robes, it doesn't make us any smarter, but it does serve as a reminder of what's expected of us. Impartiality and independence, collegiality and courage. I respect, too, the fact that in our legal order, it is for Congress and not the courts to write new laws. It is the role of judges to apply, not alter, the work of the people's representatives. A judge who likes every outcome he reaches is very likely a bad judge, stretching for results he prefers rather than those the law demands.
Joining me now, former Chief of Staff to Senator Mike Lee and current president of the Sutherland Institute, Boyd Matheson. Boyd, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz.
All right, Boyd, let's start with this question of the day. It's very simple. Like I said in the introduction, is Judge Neil Gorsuch the right pick by President Trump for Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America?
I think it absolutely is. I think Judge Gorsuch is a great choice for a lot of the reasons you just played. His own words tell you so much about the man in terms of how he is going to approach the bench, that he really sees himself not as someone to write law, but as someone who's there to call balls and strikes. And I love his quote that a judge who loves every decision he reaches is probably a pretty bad judge. And I actually think there's an interesting little nuance there. There's almost a little bit of a poke to the Chief Justice Roberts in terms of, we're not here because we like a certain policy or a certain political bent. Our job is to interpret. And so I think there may have been just a little zinger across the bow there for the Chief Justice as well.
Right. In the last couple of days, I've been reading some of Judge Gorsuch's writings, and he actually writes in that same tone of voice. Once in a while, there's that very dry humor, that witticism that's just the tiny bit pointed. I love it. I love how he writes. Let me ask you this from a political perspective, though. Why did President Trump pick him over some of the other candidates that you and I actually discussed last week?
Yeah, it was interesting coming down the home stretch. I actually thought that Judge Hardiman was going to have the inside track there going down the stretch, but I do think that it's part of keeping his promises to the American people, and I commend the president for that. There were so many voters who were Supreme Court justice voters in casting their vote for Mr. Trump, and so I think that was an important part to really deliver on that promise. I also think this was an important night in terms of how they rolled it out. With the challenges that they had with the rollout of the travel ban, this was flawlessly executed, set a great tone for great conversation, which I think is what Judge Gorsuch is all about. I think the members in the Senate, especially those from red states, are going to really like what they see and what they experience with Judge Gorsuch. And I think that's going to be very helpful in the approval process.
Right. And the suspense of the announcement, I mean, it's almost like it was put on by a showman, huh? I mean, I think this is what Trump is best at, in a sense. Besides negotiation, he's best at captivating an audience. And I think, he's captivated the whole country at this point. Everyone tuned in to listen to this. But Boyd, let me ask you, critics are saying that this is a stolen seat from Merrick Garland, who was President Obama's nominee for Supreme Court Justice, and that they potentially won't. We'll get even to the nuclear option in a second. But critics are saying this was stolen because Republicans refused to even have a hearing for Garland. What say you?
Yeah, go back historically. There's never been a justice done during the middle of a heated campaign season. So, Merrick Garland, he may have been a fine judge, who knows? But that's just the way the process has always been. And for the Democrats to obstruct now at the beginning of a term is a very different animal. And I think they're flirting with fire there a little bit if they push too hard on this one.
Right, and I do want to get into that in just a second. One more question about the man himself, Gorsuch himself. Now, he worked as a clerk for Justice Kennedy, and some people are saying with the addition of another conservative justice to the court that it'll make the makeup of the court similar to what it was when Scalia was still on the bench here. But what kind of sway do you think Gorsuch will have with Justice Kennedy because the two of them are so close?
It's going to be fascinating. And there's always that, someone that you used to work for as your boss to now be a peer with is always an interesting dynamic. And so
right, I think the word you're looking for is awkward.
Awkward, yeah. Maybe that is the right phrase. But I do think that Gorsuch he's such a soft leader. In other words, as you pointed out, he's a great writer. And I think Justice Kennedy obviously liked that when he hired him before. And so it'll be interesting. I think Gorsuch will have some nice persuasion in terms of some of those Kennedy moments that a lot of people wring their hands about. But it will be very fascinating to see how that plays.
Right, because we know that there are so many decisions that are 5-4 that swing justice makes the difference in the ruling one way or the other. It's going to be fascinating. And The Senate Republicans say they want to try to put him in by April, so he should be on the bench if all goes well, if all goes as planned, here before too long. But before then, these next 2 months, I mean, Boyd, I think it's going to be a fight. Do you think the Democrats are going to filibuster?
I don't know. The calculation on the filibuster is a really interesting one, and I don't know that Chuck Schumer is going to fire that bullet at this point in the program, because clearly there is a likelihood for several more justices to happen during the next few years, and whether that is Justice Kennedy or Justice Ginsburg or others who may step down, the Democrats are going to have some battles, and so to go and force the nuclear hand that ironically Harry Reid set the table for, is going to be a really tough calculation. And even for the wily Chuck Schumer, that's going to be tough calculation to decide to pull that trigger. If he does,
Right.
I do think that I'm not a fan of using the nuclear option. And I think there's enough people like Joe Manchin and some of those Democrats who will understand that this is someone who's uniquely qualified for the bench, who certainly has the right temperament and style and commitment to the Constitution, that he should be on the bench. And I think Chuck Schumer is going to find this to be challenging to his leadership. If he tries to go for filibuster and he has Democrats peel off and go with Republicans, that will undermine Chuck Schumer's authority and leadership for the next 3 years. And so there's a lot of calculating going on.
There's an interesting dynamic, I think, here, too, with the fact that Schumer is the minority leader, because in 2013, when then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid broke this precedent in using the nuclear option for some of Obama's lower court nominees, Schumer was one of the ones that was working behind the scenes, one of the Democrats, I should say, working behind the scenes, because he didn't think that the Democrats should be doing that. So that adds a little spicy dynamic, I think, into what they're going to choose to do. I believe there's already been 8 Democrats who've expressed some sort of skepticism with trying to filibuster here. But here's what I don't know how they're going to get over. Judge Gorsuch was approved. I mean, he was a federal appeals court judge. He's been approved by the Senate before unanimously. What are they going to say? What's changed since then?
Yeah, it's, there's nothing like a voice vote in the Senate.
Right.
It's just crickets. It's just crickets. And so a lot of those Democrats are going to have some explaining to do of what did change. What happened? Is it just because they don't like who's in the White House? Is it because they don't like the tilt of the court at the moment? Are they doing payback for the Garland nomination? And those are tough sells. Those are all things that really transform the Democratic Party into the party of no and the obstructionists. And I think they're going to have a hard time selling that to the American people who voted for change and disruption in a very different way with President Trump.
Right, and I think they're also, in a political sense, they're going to have a hard time explaining that to their constituents who voted for Donald Trump, and by voting for Donald Trump knew they'd be getting a Supreme Court nominee similar, if not exactly like Gorsuch.
That's
Boyd,
right. And the Senate Democrats have a really tough map in 2018. It's going to be really hard for them to make headway if they're having these kind of battles this early in the program.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, because usually it's opposite, I think, that the incumbent president, their party stands to lose in the midterm elections, but it's opposite this time. Democrats are the ones that have a lot of seats up for grabs, whereas Republicans don't so much in 2018. Boyd, we do have to go. Thank you so much for being here, sir.